Toby, given President Trump's focus on America First policies, how will his administration's priorities impact the staffing industry?
Well, Brad, it's a really, really good question. And I think we have the ability to look at his previous administration to give us kind of a roadmap of what this next 4 years could look like. And I think there's going to be a lot of concentration on bringing jobs back into the country, especially in the manufacturing realm. There's going to be some heavy tax incentives to bring companies back. There's going to be some other things to not only bring companies back, but there may be some penalties if you have a company that starts to look to offshoring jobs again. And I think that's going to be the focus from that standpoint, is bringing jobs back, keeping them here, again, especially manufacturing. And then we kind of bridge into the whole immigration question. Like, what
Sure.
are we going to do about visas, especially the high-tech visas? What are we going to do about people that are here currently working that may not be fully authorized to be here? What is that effort going to look like? And so I think it's kind of a multifaceted answer, but I think it's going to start with an aggressive approach to try to bring industry and jobs back to the United States that may have moved offshore in the past 4 years.
So I got a question on that. In terms of bringing jobs back to America, first off, I'm all for it. But my question is, who is going to do those jobs? So when we think about just raw data, and this is kind of short term and long term. One, if we tighten immigration, we have less people coming in. We know birth rate is way down the last 10 years. Not that a 10-year-old is going to be in the workforce now, but they will eventually. And then another alarming stat that I actually heard at the Massachusetts Staffing Association is the male demographic is committing suicide at an alarming rate. And it's growing at alarming rates post-COVID. So individuals who could be in the workforce, unfortunately, are no longer in the workforce. So yes, bringing all these jobs back, great. Who's going to do them, though?
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think we have yet to see that full rebound from COVID when people left the workforce. And, for the longest time, we attributed it to, extra unemployment, and we attributed it to, house market values soaring. And so people were selling their house and they had all sorts of capital. But what we did see also with that was we saw a lot of people retire early and get out of the workforce. And so I think one of the things that they're hoping for is that people start coming back into the workforce that either left because they retired and now maybe they're bored, maybe they're looking to get back into things, maybe their money is not lasting as long as they thought it would be, or they're going to try to entice people that left and never came back to come back again. And one of the ways, for a certain amount of the population that they may try to do that is by doing certain things with regards to, if you have people that are on either public assistance or maybe Medicaid. The Trump administration has been a big fan of using waivers to allow states to put work requirements on receiving certain federal funds. And so if you've got a work requirement in place, if you're on Medicaid, if you're on public assistance, and now you've got to work 20 hours a week to be eligible for those, that's another part of the carrot, so to speak, that could maybe draw some of these people back into the workforce. But the question is then going to be, with a lot of these jobs, do we have, and this is the industry and the business community has been fighting this for a decade, do we have the skilled workers to do these jobs? Because we're not just talking about, basic manufacturing jobs that anybody can do. You're talking now more about, what we always refer to as the skills gap. And I think one of the concerns that this administration is going to face is, do they have the skilled workers to fill these jobs when they come back? And what is their approach going to be to try to upskill the workforce that's not ready to do this? In the first administration, they tried apprenticeships. Wasn't a great success. Now, we've grown a lot from there, and we know a lot of programs have been put in place. And actually, the staffing industry has put a lot of programs in place to upskill their employees or potential employees. So the government is going to need to rely on, as is often the case, private intuition and innovation, and then help where they can to get these employees to a place where they can move up to these higher paying, more in-demand jobs that are going to come back.
Yeah, if anything, I think that screams more value for staffing and recruiting firms. It screams more reason to partner with a staffing or recruiting firm, because if it's hard to find top talent, having a partner who's going to do that for you certainly makes a ton of sense.
Sure. And it not only makes a ton of sense, but you can, and this is the basis of the model, right?
Yeah.
You can call up somebody and say, Brad, I need 4 people that do X, Y, Z, and then can handle this. And Brad's going to go take care of that. And now you're going to go and you're going to take care of other parts of your business.
Right.
And, in a day, Brad's going to call you and say, hey, I've got these 5 people. I've interviewed them. They seem to have what you want. Why don't you take a look at them? Because if you can't stop doing the rest of your business to try to find people, that you need to place. So yeah, it's very important and a great way to bridge that.
What else should we know on the immigration policy side of things that might impact staffing and recruiting firms in the upcoming 4 years?
Well, I think, the first immediate thing is going to be, does this administration focus on what they campaigned on, which was this mass deportation?
Right.
Or, as has been suggested, are they going to focus more on securing the border, keeping folks that shouldn't be coming into the country, keeping them out, and then maybe turning a little bit to seeing who's here? Because as we know, there are a ton of jobs being done by people that are here that would not be done by anybody else. Now, the administration has said they're going to go after and deport, criminals that are here. A lot of the fentanyl traffic is being tied to illegals. If the administration did that and focused on those folks, I don't think many people would have a problem.
Right.
There's also a cost measure here, because to go ahead and try to round up everybody that's not supposed to be here, it's going to cost billions of dollars. You're going to have to, it's literally the definition in a lot of ways of a wild goose chase.
Right.
And you're going to do damage to the economy. But if you can say, okay, we're always looking to make sure people should be here that are here, but really focus your energy on securing the border and making sure that whatever traffic is coming in is stopped or significantly slowed down while keeping the economy the way it is. I think that's going to be certainly the approach the business community wants, because what they're afraid of is if you did go and, for lack of a better word, round up a bunch of people that shouldn't be here and deport them to Mexico, now all these jobs aren't being filled and aren't going to be filled. It could be catastrophic for the economy. And I think that's what the business community is trying to get forward to the president and his aides. And I think the second thing is going to be, what is the visa program going to look like in the next, couple years, especially with the high-tech visas? Are we going to have a sharp reduction as we saw in the first administration? One of the other things that the first administration tried to get through Congress, it'll be difficult, but they'll probably try it again, is they'll move away from what is usually referred to as kind of a humanitarian-based selection process for certain visas to a merit-based process. And so in the starkest details, if you have a family of 4 that's coming over to meet other family, and you've got 4 individuals that are all employees that are going to come over and work and contribute to the economy, they're going to get that preference when it comes to doling out these visas. There's going to be almost a fast pass lane for folks that are coming in strictly to work than for those that are coming to reunite with family or coming to maybe escape, oppression in their country. And obviously that creates its own problems and issues.
Yeah. It's, I want to say on one side, it's a positive for the industry, right? If people are coming over to work, we can help that, right? On the other side, there is obviously emotional and other areas that I don't really want to get into on this show, with why you wouldn't want to let some other people in. So I certainly hear that and get that.
Yeah, and you also, Brad, remind me of another thing for our audience. I do think the thing that's going to happen no matter what is you will see a huge uptick in enforcement. And that means like worksite audits.
Right.
You're going to see a huge increase in audits on I-9s. And so you're going to want to make sure that you got your people that are doing the I-9s know exactly what they're supposed to be doing in every case, in every scenario. It's not a bad idea. Well, you've got 7 weeks before the administration takes over, maybe a little bit more, to do an audit of your current I-9 process and what you have. Because here's the other thing that folks don't necessarily always remember. And it's a tricky thing, and it can be really costly.
Mm-hmm.
If you have I-9s that you are legally entitled to destroy, but you don't. Let's say you've got a carton of I-9s from 2010 in your storage room. They can, and you're in an audit, they're going to look at those and they're going to fine you for any mistakes on those I-9s, even though you could have shredded them 5 years ago. So it's really important that when you can get rid of legally an I-9, that you do it, because if there's even a clerical error on there, even if it's from 2012, that's fair game for a fine, and those things add up quickly. So making sure that you've got your whole I-9 process in place is going to be very important, and we're going to watch and see what kind of push there is from the administration to make Congress pass a mandatory E-Verify law. Again, that won't be, given the margins, a very easy task, but it wouldn't surprise me if that's one of the first immigration legislative vehicles that the administration urges this Congress to pursue.
Okay, very good. Let's talk tax policy. So as we look at kind of shifting the lens here towards tax policy, what is on the horizon and what should staffing firms know as they look again to President Trump's second term?
The tax policy is going to be all you hear about probably for the next 8 weeks, because there are several provisions of the 2017 Job and Tax Cut and Jobs Act that are expiring at the end of next year. Everything from various R&D credits that businesses use to buy new equipment and to try new things, to the individual tax rates that people pay, to, especially of concern for a lot of staffing firms, the Section 199A pass-through deduction. And what that is, very quickly, is qualified businesses, and they're usually kind of S corps or LLCs, that are in a qualified business, which staffing is, can take a 20% deduction on income up to a certain amount. And it's been something that has been very advantageous to a lot of staffing firms. That is expiring at the end of next year. And that needs to be renewed, ideally permanently, but at least needs to be renewed for another several years. And we could go on and on. The work opportunity tax credit expires at the end of 2025. And there's obviously going to be other things that the president talked about on the campaign trail. He talked about eliminating taxes on tips for, tipped workers. He's talked about eliminating taxes on Social Security benefits. He's talked about eliminating taxes on citizens that live abroad and come back. So a lot of things that want to get done, they're going to have to be mostly paid for, or it's going to add to the deficit. But this is going to be very important, because anything that gets passed in this administration, I think, is going to be something that's going to benefit the economy, and it's going to benefit the staffing industry, especially if the 199A deduction is renewed.
With so many moving parts, and I'm sure ASA is a key player here, but with so many moving parts, how can Brad, the owner at Brad Staffing Firm, stay knowledgeable on all of the areas that are going to impact his business?
Well, I mean, shameless plug, but I think the first thing is you join ASA and you become an ASA member, because we send out information all the time to our folks, not only letting them know what's going on, but a lot of times asking them for their help as these bills are working through Congress or the state legislatures, letting them know what they can do to get the industry's perspective in the minds of the legislators, which is so important. Yeah. I would also say, besides that, joining local chambers of commerce, especially when it comes to state issues, right? The New York State Chamber of Commerce is going to be key and letting folks know all the issues that are coming out and about, and even, down on the city level. Even, for example, the New York City Chamber of Commerce is going to be key to talk about, okay, here's what's coming up, here's what you all, and we talk about, Brad, the important thing is we see legislation in the staffing world in kind of two buckets. We see the first bucket, which thankfully is relatively small, legislation that's aimed specifically at staffing. We saw that most recently in Illinois and New Jersey with the temporary worker right to know and the equal benefits provisions. More frequently, what we see is what we call the bigger bucket, which is the business bills aimed at all businesses, but because of the industry and the way that it works, it has problematic features for the staffing industry. And sometimes there are laws that we couldn't possibly comply with if we wanted to,
right?
Because of the way the bill works. So staying in touch with ASA and your Chamber of Commerce, and then being able to go up to legislators when these bills are introduced and say, look, we're not against XYZ, but we can't possibly do it like this because of the way our industry works. And this is why is really vital to your business and to the industry as a whole.
Okay. I know when I listened to you talk on the ASA webinar on a similar topic at time of recording, it was yesterday. By the time we drop this, it'll be the week prior. You seem the most excited about, maybe excited is the wrong word, but the most excited about the energy and infrastructure policies that were sort of looming here as it relates to our industry. I remember you saying on the call that you had led that it's going to open up a lot of jobs for the industry, right?
Right.
Walk us through that and walk us through sort of the opportunity that lies ahead in that specific space.
Yeah, and again, we can look back toward, I said this on the webinar yesterday. This is the first time since 1892 we have had a president reelected after losing an election while he was president, right? So we have President Trump 2016, loses in 2020, comes back in 2024. So we have this playbook, as you talked about, that we can look back on. One of the thriving industries during the first Trump administration was energy. And whether it was fracking in Pennsylvania, whether it was looking to, explore more ways to become domestically energy dependent and not dependent on foreign energy. And we saw especially oil and natural gas just go through the roof from a staffing perspective because of the amount of jobs there that are available. And again, there are jobs all across the spectrum. They can come down to, very specific manual labor jobs all the way up to really technical jobs of finding where the natural gas is and developing ways to get it out the most effective ways. And so as we kind of turned away from that for the past 4 years, as the administration shifted from not necessarily domestic dependent, but we shifted from oil, natural gas, fracking to more of a green approach with renewable energies. And we saw that with the Inflation Reduction Act, with all the tax credits that went toward those kind of programs that created jobs as well. Now we're going to see a shift back, I think, toward the process of oil, natural gas, fracking in the country, and we're going to see the industry really poised to take advantage of that surge in job demand for those kind of positions. And so for the folks that have done it before, they're in place to continue to do it and do it better. And if you're looking for areas to expand in, it's probably not a bad idea to look and see what it would look like to do that.
Yeah, I know I typically have a challenge advocating for changing a niche or changing a vertical, right? If you find something that's working really well for you and you're in healthcare, it's gonna be very difficult for me to say, listen, now all of a sudden you need to invest all of your chips over here because that's where, the pot of gold is. Right. But in a case like this, where we know certain industries aren't thriving as much as others, it might make sense to sort of differentiate and sort of expand out that service line to see what it is that you can do or how it correlates with the current business that you are running.
Right. Absolutely.
Toby, and I know you pay an incredible amount of attention to all of this. Anything that we haven't talked about that's been on your radar that we should know about or our listeners should know about?
Well, we talked yesterday about the fact that one of the areas where we don't have a roadmap from the previous Trump administration and how he'll act in the next 4 years is regards to artificial intelligence. And just
Sure.
to really touch on how much this whole field has grown, I don't know that anybody was really talking about AI in 2018, 2019. And now it's all we talk about.
Right.
And so we're trying to get a sense of what is the administration's policy going to be toward AI, especially from our standpoint with AI and employment, because we know that the states right now are leading the charge in trying to regulate and make sure that AI in the employment context is used in a fair way, which we have no problem with. It's just some of the things that they try to do to get there is counterproductive and actually, really could cost people the opportunity to find work. So the administration, I think, if I had to guess, the ties to the big tech companies may let them drag their feet a little bit on a federal policy. Congress is so close again, even though Republicans control both branches. I mean, the House is probably not going to have more than a 5-seat majority, and the Senate is very close. So that's going to be an area, the AI policy is going to be the area that really states focus on. And that's going to need a lot of attention because it's such a complicated area. And one of the things that we're talking about, the thing that we see a lot of, and we'll probably see more of, is this AI in regards to hiring. And it's the software that you use to find people to fill your jobs, whether it's something you've created, whether it's one of the marketplaces like a Bullhorn or a Monster, LinkedIn, all these things that post jobs or post resumes or both. That approach toward AI and what the potential employer needs to do when looking for people is really, really, really important. And, the goal is laudable. They're trying to make sure that these products don't lead to discriminatory results. But you've got to do it in a way that is effective and fair and doesn't keep people from looking to fill jobs, therefore costing people jobs. So I think that's going to be the area that's going to be most in the dark with regards to what role the federal government plays and watching states maybe become more aggressive in trying to take that area over.
Who's currently liable in that situation? So if a staffing firm is using technology to weed through resumes, is it at the risk of the software, or is it the risk of the staffing firm, or is it at the risk of the client down the line if there is inadvertent discriminatory practices happening with that software?
It's a great question, and that's really what is being focused on now, because when you look at it now and you say, okay, you're filling a position and you filled 6 like positions, and every time you fill that position, it's been filled by, or the results pop up, a 25 to 28-year-old white male.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now is that leading to discriminatory hiring? And so then you go back and look and say, the question now is, well, is the program leading you to that result, or is it the data that's being put in or the search request that's being put in by the staffing firm leading the program to that result?
Right.
And depending on what side you're on, you can see where the arguments are.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that these bills want to do is they want to say every year you need to audit this type of software. But who pays for that audit? Because first of all, the staffing firm just can't crack open the software and audit it themselves.
Right.
And so the staffing firm's like, well, the developer should audit it. And the developer says, no, we shouldn't. The staffing firm should audit it. And so that's really the issue, because you need to make sure that whatever, the code is right, and the code isn't learning on itself to create bad problems. And then if you could solve that, then you would know, have a better idea of where the liability is. But to answer your question right now, nobody knows. And it's not something that's really taught, unless it's the most blatant scenarios, and we talk about that all the time. You can't put in your job requests or your job ads, must be a U.S. citizen, unless there's some very, very specific exemptions involved. And most times that kind of thing doesn't fly. Other than that, it's a gray area. And that's one of the reasons why these states are trying to get these laws in place.
Yeah, it's tough. I know I use AI regularly. We use AI regularly, and the software is learning from itself. It is compounding on itself. That's why it is so advantageous to use it in terms of an efficiency level or in terms of expediting workflows, right? There's a reason for software to operate as, I call it my personal assistant, right? There are things that I don't want to do that it is very, very good at. But when we're looking at hiring, when we're looking at screening, when we're looking at a lot of the practices where we need to be human, it gets dicey and it gets kind of tricky. And I'll be honest, I wouldn't want to make the call and trying to figure out who's liable in that situation. And that's why I asked you where that blame falls as of right now.
Yeah. So right now, nobody really knows.
Yeah.
And so that is really the $100,000 question that at some point is going to be addressed by statute.
Very good. Toby, I appreciate you, sir. I know you're a busy man. I know coming to us live from another state conference that
Madison,
you're at
Wisconsin.
Shortly.
Yeah.
Madison, Wisconsin, the great Madison, Wisconsin.
That's right.
Before I let you go, I got to run you through our rapid fire round if you got a couple minutes here.
Sure, absolutely.
The first, one book that has fundamentally changed your life.
There's probably a lot that I could say, but The Making of a President 1960, which is written by Theodore White, and it's detailed of how Senator John Kennedy and Richard Nixon became the major candidates for that election. I had to read it in high school, and it changed my life because it got me the political bug and set me off to go to D.C. to college and go to work on Capitol Hill and do this for, over 20 years now. So I think that's probably the first book I would say.
And the dominoes fell from there.
Mm-hmm.
And then one piece of advice that you would give to somebody just starting in staffing and recruiting. What are you going to tell them?
Find a mentor and find maybe more than one, right? You can have somebody that is, much older than you. You can have somebody that is just a couple years older than you, but has been in the industry for maybe longer than you have. I have several mentors, and, this is such a dynamic industry and it's such a people-driven industry. The more advice you can get from people on how to handle certain circumstances and certain scenarios is going to be invaluable. And then you need to be prepared to make yourself available as a mentor. And I know people that are 60 years old that still have mentors, right? And younger mentors, especially as kind of technology changes. I know, we have some older folks that lean on younger people to learn how to do things. So, just a big fan of mentors and using people's experience to help you move along. And if you can get that kind of guidance, it's going to set you up for the rest of your life.
And then Toby, real quick, I'll give you the floor here. If anybody has any questions, they're not sure what is going to impact them, their staffing firm, as we progress into 2025, how can they get a hold of you? How can they get a hold of ASA?
So we are, what we do is we are here for our members to answer their questions and help them the best way we can. And sometimes that's referring you to outside counsel. Most of the times it's giving you advice and letting you know what to do. I can be reached, T. Malara at americanstaffing.net. The website, americanstaffing.net, has the whole company directory. We've got, a 5-person legal team. We've got research that is top notch. We've got events coming up all over the place. Our CEO event, Execuvisions, in February. We're always looking to help out and grow the industry. So reach out with an email or a phone call, and we are here to help you. And don't hesitate to pick up the phone and give us a call.
He's Toby Malara, Vice President of Government Relations at the American Staffing Association. Toby, can't thank you enough for coming on this episode and taking the stage with me, buddy.
Thank you, Brad. I appreciate it, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.